Welcome back to the Medcurity Podcast. In today's episode, our CEO, Joe Gellatly, sits down with Mike Armistead, a seasoned cybersecurity entrepreneur who's currently developing an AI security company in stealth mode. They dive into the intersection of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, unpacking both the challenges and the new opportunities emerging for security leaders. You will hear them discuss everything from AI's role in healthcare security and improving vendor relationships to the communication skills that separate good security leaders from great ones. Stick around through the end for a look at upcoming healthcare cybersecurity initiatives and some exciting collaboration ideas for the year ahead. Enjoy the episode.
Hey, Mike. Well, thank you for joining us today. We're excited to be talking with Mike Armistead, and we are talking about a couple of very hot topics in our world today, which of course would be cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, and how those two areas intersect for specifically healthcare, but also just in general, what we're seeing in the market. We can learn from all the industries, and Mike's got an incredible cybersecurity background and company building background. I would love to just start really briefly. What's your current project? What are you working on right now? And let's go through the journey that got you there after that, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, it's funny. I find myself now, I actually have to describe myself as a serial entrepreneur, which I don't know if I ever set out to be that, but the last 20 some years it's been in cybersecurity, and the last 8 to 10 has been in the AI side. So it's a pretty interesting. Current project is I'm a CEO of a small startup called Pulse Security AI. We're still in stealth, but generally what we're doing is we're using AI to help security leaders with all those manual tasks that they have, really around strategy that affect their program. And that can be anywhere from how they engage with the board to, the details they have to pull up from all those tools and things that they have and put it at the right level.
Wonderful. Right. Well, so as you mentioned, serial entrepreneur, you certainly earned that title in a very successful way. Do you want to talk through the companies, a couple of those wins you've had in the past that you've built, and how that maybe led to where you are today, and without getting too much into the current project, just if you can recap some things you learned maybe out of the journey so far in your career.
No, that's great. So, I guess the number's up to 6, of which 5 have turned out pretty well. There's, you always have to stub your toe, I guess, to really learn a lot of stuff there too. Actually, one of the more interesting things for the audience is everyone knows Netflix, and maybe there's their founder and CEO, who's now the chairman, Reed Hastings. I was actually in Reed's first startup, which is a very technical startup doing a memory debugger for C and C++ software developers. And we actually went public after a couple of years because it taught me you build a beautiful product, and you can make mistakes in a lot of places, and just stay focused on it, that thing delivering value, and it delivered a ton of value kind of within that. But I think generally what it also taught me was, it was one of those things throughout my career that I've kind of looked at markets and didn't look at maybe the thing that was the center of that, but it was like, what things are going to be needed in the future in that. So that was one of these where, believe it or not, way back in the 80s, software was becoming such a core part to enterprises that it had to work right. And so being on the tools side made sense. And that's kind of where in cyber I've gone to too. We did that in the AppSec world, where now software not only had to work, it had to be resilient against attack. And so we spent many years, a company called Fortify that eventually got bought by Hewlett Packard, and I stayed at Hewlett Packard for 5 years and got involved with all sorts of different security parts of their business as a general manager within that. But that led us to the first thing in 2016. We started a company called Response Software, and that was using AI in the very early days. This is way before LLMs. So guess what? AI has been out there for a while, and it's more like an expert system. But it was meant to be, I'll put it in today's terms, an assistant for the security operations center analyst to decipher all these alerts that are coming their way, and what do they have to concentrate on and what shouldn't they. And then we built from that, we got bought by a company called Mandiant, which is pretty well known in cybersecurity. They do a lot of the incident response work as consultants. They go in after someone's been breached and help them get on their feet again, and discover what was the gap that kind of led to that breach. And two, but they also had products to help prevent that. And so we did that, and we got bought by Google a couple of years ago. And so that when Google's Code Red happened, was his ChatGPT came out, and Google was like, wait, there's these LLMs. We invented a lot of that stuff, and what do we do? But it gave us the idea for this post-security AI. So like that's really using the capabilities of these models now to assist people in all sorts of things. As we know, everyone's probably used them to help summarize things, to clean up their email, to do all things. But you can use them for different other tasks, but they have their issues themselves. And so that kind of led us to, can we create something that is trustworthy, that is accurate, that is safe for security people? And that's what we end up doing a lot of in today.
Mike, do you think some of that background in AI prior to the LLMs, prior to the current models that we have, did the new models reset everybody's experience? Or were you able to, do you think there's good lessons out of the history of AI that has been brought into the current technologies that you can use too?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, there clearly is, a new path that these LLMs have forged, and it's pretty amazing technology. What it also is some technology that it doesn't mean that the normal problems go away. And I think the background in it, I'd say, is the first instance kind of opened the eyes up to, it's good at some things and bad at other things. And same with the technology we started with. It was really good at some things, but other things that it just didn't do that well. And yeah, I think it definitely informed about where you could apply this and where you should apply it or not. I mean, I think the biggest thing with AI is, as we know, is in using it, you have to be very attentive to the directions you give it, and because it's going to want to fill the space. So if it doesn't know the answer, it's still going to want to make up something, and that's the hallucination side of it.
Yeah.
But it can also not, they also don't follow, some models don't follow, well, say it this way, some models follow directions better than others as well. And so, you have to keep a lot of these things in mind when you're using it.
A really kind of ridiculous example from yesterday evening of that tension would be, I was using Codex, which is the Chat GPT, the open AI tool behind some of Chat GPT. It's what they use for development, accelerates development incredibly. So using Codex is incredible, powerful. Writing code is solving these problems, it's doing this debugging. And then I went over and asked ChatGPT a question about it, and ChatGPT, also from OpenAI, said, Codex was retired a couple years ago. You can't use it. It doesn't exist. And I had to ask it 3 different times and say, this is your product. Here's the website on OpenAI. And it's like, I'm sorry, you're right. There it is. But this is one of those ridiculous, super, super powerful tool. And at the same time, you have those glitches that you still find, and I think we've seen it in our software journey where something looks like we could execute something in 2 days, but if you have a high standard for accuracy and reliability, it still takes time. It takes a lot of time to tune those models, and so I have a lot of respect for I think what we've learned in AI, what you're doing. Looking forward to is we've found that those models are powerful, but they're not fully trustworthy with the really important things. So we have to build those guardrails around that, it sounds like.
Well, and the consumer side ends up almost building a belief that you can do a single shot question and you're just going to get an answer. And I think some of the thing and it might be interesting because you start to view these models as being these sources, when in fact they're actually just tools that can go to the source and just have a wide repository of the sources, because they're just only as good as what they're trained on. And so it's a mistaken thing to treat them as a database of answers. You shouldn't do that. You should view them as a tool to get the answer. And I know it's a little subtle thing, but boy, it makes a big difference in how you use it and how you think about it as well.
Well said. I love that. It's certainly one of those areas of technology where we really just have to use it more to learn how to use it well. And you learn the downs, you learn where it's strong, you learn where it's weak, the more you use it. I want to jump into how it can be used for for evil, I guess I'll say. But let's get looking at the cybersecurity landscape. Let's look at how those bad actors are weaponizing AI before we get into how we can use that or look at that in a way to defend us. But what are you seeing? Are there trends that you're seeing? What are you seeing as far as how the AI technology is being weaponized against us?
Yeah, so I'll say something pretty obvious, and then I'll say something maybe a little contrarian. The obvious part is, yeah, they're using it in ways that you kind of that are new and novel, and also they're making use of just the volume and the speed that these things can provide to them. So the new and novel is you have really an attack vector like prompt injection that you never had to worry about before. And prompt injection is one of these things where you're basically using the system against itself and asking for it for information. It's a great way for these attackers to kind of exfiltrate something that you don't want exfiltrated. And it still is based on on being able to kind of you like I said, use it against itself. But also then, but it's a new kind of way of doing it, and people just trust these things. And I guess, sorry, the reason I was hesitating was it also is something that is an old thing where the business typically is out way in front of the security team, and so they're using it for all these things, and they want to stand these things up without thinking about what a bad guy could do with it and how they might be able to leverage it. And I think there's a great example of that. And of course, there's other obvious things where they can weaponize these attacks and have them, like you could do a denial of service, that's just that puts such a flood of things in and can hide within that flood the real malicious type stuff in a way that just the speed and the volume and that just hasn't been there before. The contrarian part that I'd say is, and security people will know this too, is it still gets down to doing your security hygiene well. You still have to know what's exposed, and you still have to know what you have, and be able to try to prevent them from kind of getting there. I think a lot of the AI attacks that you're starting to see, ultimately they get down to very old techniques of what they're doing. It's just that they've hidden them in ways that are maybe novel in that too. So it's you still have to watch out for those vulnerabilities that you may have in your organization. It's just that the vector they use to get there might be novel, but they're still, you need to patch readily when something that's critical to your organization needs patching. You still need to protect things in a way and maybe segment your network in a way so the blast radius isn't so high. You talk about healthcare, it's like we all know how ransomware has kind of really come in and been on a rise. Well, we have to take those steps. We have to have endpoint detection and response tooling. We have to make sure we've actually practiced our disaster recovery, because we may get into that situation and know that. These are all things that we know about security, and AI, I think, just ups the stakes a little bit because they can throw things out at the market in general a lot quicker and use it.
So you're saying more of a speed and creativity to the attacks, but really the attack surface, we don't have to rip and replace our idea of security infrastructure. The attack surface is similar. It's speed. It's different ways of approaching it. But we don't have to reset our view of cybersecurity. We just have to get really good at it. And
yeah, and I think like we're seeing the models do to the general population is. Especially like take the software development side, is now we have the vibe coding where if you're not a developer, you could still get a prototype up fairly quickly by just speaking to it in English and things, and it can do these kinds of things. The attackers can use that too. So now you have people that for bad intent. Now we've kind of expanded the population of those attackers, unfortunately, with this technology. And so you're going to see just a rise in maybe just the volume of things that are coming in just from the population expanding.
And of course, from the social engineering side, the creativity and the speed and also the ability to personalize is really escalated, right? So we're, instead of just the spam mass phishing emails, we're seeing highly personalized, targeted, knowledgeable emails that are still just the same devious intent.
Yeah, I mean, what you had just said, the spear phishing just becomes so personal. It feels like, yes, indeed, this is something I know. And it just forces the population on the defender side to just be that much more critical about things they receive. In that, I often talk about, if you generalize this, if I can think of something that this world of AI has brought to us, we have to, the education, critical thinking is going to be one of those things that we just have to bring in from junior high, high school, college. And then of course, as employees, we just have to think about, hey, do I really believe this? And can I confirm it in a way and verify that it's indeed someone I trust, or it's just coming out of the blue? Because the deep fakes and the ability to know something about you is gonna be easier for the attackers.
The critical thinking combined with a sense of paranoia and
Yeah.
training to keep reminding, right? Ongoing security awareness gets more important too, because you can't do a once a year
Absolutely.
training and have everyone remember 6 months in what their responsibility is as an employee to protect the organization. So you listed off a few things that were just good: cybersecurity, hygiene. Do you think, I mean, maybe we could dive into that just a bit more. Like, is it just the same key principles of cybersecurity that need to be really focused on? Is it evolving? Are there things that are shifting
Uh,
as we do all that?
I mean, there's certainly an evolution that has to take. I mean, people have to have a policy about around AI now. I mean, that's like I said, the business side wants to use it because they could reach more people, they could service the patients better. They could, there's lots of different angles to this, but it introduces another component that needs to be protected. And so there's both the technology that needs to be protected and just the policies of use that needs to be protected. I mean, not everybody thinks about the fact that to make the AI better, you give it more context. Well, some of that context could be getting you into sharing PII, and that's with the model, and it makes it better for sure. But you can't do that, right? I mean, it's okay, where does that go after it gets to the model, and do you know even where that goes? So there's really an evolution that has to happen because of this technology, for sure. And what you said is, it raises the stakes on the hygiene factors. Even things that like our policies around your passwords and things. I mean, you really have to have that nailed down to do that. And I had mentioned before things like your disaster recovery, like your vulnerability management. These things become just much more important because they can be exploited a little bit better.
Do you think AI is making any of that easier or giving us new ways to approach both of those things you just mentioned: vulnerability management, incident response, disaster recovery?
I mean, what cybersecurity vendor does not have an AI component on it on top of their stuff? So certainly there's features that can help those defend against it. I think there's going to be new kinds of detection products that'll come about because of just that's the age-old war that we're faced with, which it's like there's innovation on the attacker side, there's going to be innovation on the defender side within it. I do think cybersecurity, though, has been over the last, call it, decade, has swung the pendulum to be much more detection oriented. And I think we have to swing that pendulum back towards the prevention side a little bit more. And that's where you get into, the strategy and, well, paying attention to the risks that the organization has, and then your strategy to mitigate those risks, I think, has got to become much more centralized with it. And I do think AI can help in there too. And you heard me describe generally about what we're doing. We think we can apply technology, AI technology at that level to be much more smarter and actually broader even about the things that we can prevent because as we also know, it's with attackers is, they're going to look for the lowest hanging fruit they can, because it's more productive for them to go after the people that don't have their act together, as well as the people that do have their act together. And so yes, I think AI can be applied both on the detection and on the prevention side for the defenders, because they can make use of it to make themselves stronger.
Obviously, that's a message that resonates with healthcare, just in healthcare, talking about getting away from simply focusing on the detection side, I'll say, and focusing on prevention. Like that message, is a healthcare message too. So applying it to cybersecurity, I think our healthcare organizations have not necessarily been the most protected targets, right? They're the easier targets. Like the joke about running from a bear, you just have to run faster than the person next to you. I think we've been healthcare has been for a lot of reasons, but some of it is the resources available. Some of it is, there's a different level of accountability for financial institutions that really bolstered them before ransomware attacks took off. But healthcare, just the healthcare organizations have just been extremely targeted. So it creates this space right now. What's happening is that the attacks are evolving potentially quicker than the defense side, especially in healthcare. So helping organizations think about where to focus, where to start has been really key right now. And one piece that you've covered a good amount of this. One piece that you touched on was the policy side of it and having guardrails. And I would just say quickly, one thing we've seen is that there's some organizations are just saying no, right? Don't use AI yet. And they're putting that message out. And then what you find is, as you walk through that the actual real world is what you said earlier, businesses get ahead of technology. They're going to start using it because it's so incredibly powerful. So instead of just teaching abstinence, we're seeing that it really is the right time to be thinking about policies. So do you have guidance in that area to start thinking as an organization, how do we step into this if we were standing back a little bit? That's a lot of groups right now that we talk to.
Yeah, no, it's true. Think about the technology transitions that have happened, and they give us good lessons for this. So let's talk a more recent one, the transition to cloud. Remember, most people started with saying no to cloud, and then they realized the benefits that they could get from using cloud-based applications. And in fact, they might even become better at security because they could make use of those vendors of cloud to put the right security in, and they have experts, and they could in effect expand their team or their scope by even using those things. But we had to put policies in place, so you couldn't just willy-nilly go off and use whatever thing was in the cloud just because it was in the cloud. And there's a really old adage that applies to the AI side right now. It's called shadow IT. There is shadow AI happening all over the place. And so you do need to have that policy. And maybe another concept that I'll introduce here is I like to use this notion of situational security. We all know from a security standpoint, situational awareness is really important because it's about both who's attacking you and then both what's your situation like? How many people do you have? And you mentioned this, Joe. How big's your team? What resources do you have available? How much budget do you have? And really, going back to the previous question too, AI can help expand, if you think about it, your resources or your scope that you have. And so, there's a lot of good things with that. But certainly, you're needing to have those policies is important because, when you think of your situation, what are your critical assets? Like you have assets all over the place, but your critical ones got to have more of your attention. And then what are the vectors that people start to use? So they use software, your access control becomes even more important now because it's like who's doing, what, and you can actually track these things. So yes, there's things become more important kind of within that. But I think looking at your situation, knowing what you do, and you got to get your head out of the sand a little bit in that, knowing that there's going to be usage of this new technology because the business wants to use it, even for just responding to support tickets and things like this. I mean, it could be so powerful there. You got to think about, okay, but how do we mitigate any kind of risk that we may have just introduced?
Let's say someone's listening who's really more on the administration side. They're not deep in IT. When you talk about the fresh approach to it, then with all the concerns and injection and those types of issues that could come up, are we at a place where there is a safe level of usage for AI? Should they be? Is it risk greater in adoption, or is the risk greater in not adopting? And I know adopting can look like a little bit to extreme, but would you advise just high level in say an administrative position of an organization and the current risks? Do you pump the brakes? Do you go full speed ahead because it's a competitive advantage? What's your big picture view of this?
Yeah, again, it depends on your situation. Like, how forward leaning are you on technology in general, and your customer base? How much do they expect it, or would like it, or not? Or the other side of that, how conservative is your base, and what do you think they do? I think everybody needs to at least be educated on what's going on in this technology area. And so that does mean using it. It may mean limited use, and it may mean that you have pilots that you're able to help control both the education you need to do by the people using it. Um, we talked about just, in thinking about what data am I putting in to give it context, and on how sensitive is that data. Um, but running those experiments and seeing what actually works and not. I mean, it like any new technology, you're going to want to start to pilot it first, gain some learning before you do a massive rollout. I wouldn't suggest anyone to just goes for it because there's a lot of risk in this area. But I also would never advise people to say, it's a fad, just wait till it passes. Because like cloud, it's going to be there. And you can't really deny there's so much energy going towards it. And there is so much benefit that could come from it, especially in organizations that are resource constrained. Like a lot of healthcare organizations, they're resource constrained on their technology and on their security side. And it could offer a lot there. And so, yeah, I think it's something that you should do, but you should do it with your eyes open.
I love this. So look at it from a pilot standpoint, and know coming into it, like you said, what are your critical assets? What's your lower risk data points that you can maybe start with to get a handle on how does this handle my data? What kind of value can I get from it before you're feeding things like protected health information into it? Do you think that it's a better posture? Let's say you're a resource constrained rural hospital, better posture to wait for your trusted known vendors to bring something to you to try? Should you be pushing into this and getting on the edge cases, the frontier software coming out? What do you think? Do you have a perspective on that?
I mean, vendors can bring a lot of knowledge to that, but you really have to dig deep into how they're using it and how they want you to use it, and to make sure that that's a part of it. I mean, we all know part of that policy thing has to think through your supply chain of your vendors within that, and unfortunately, that's a big lift for a lot of people. You give them the questionnaire and they answer it. How often do you go back to that questionnaire and say, yeah, you had that risk and we signed off on that risk? Did you mitigate it, and how did you mitigate it? And so it becomes much more of a continuous process, to be better at that. But those vendors can come and say, hey, look, let's start here, and here's what we're going to do within it. And I think everyone knows in AI, if I think generally, the two lead areas that seem to be getting a lot of traction are in the software development side. So the developers use a lot of AI on that too. They're very technically savvy and things, and it's just kind of goes with the workflow that they have as having an assistant to help them with that. But the other side does seem to be in the customer support, customer success kind of area too. And I think you see a lot of vendors you can ease your way into knowing this. Now, with healthcare, you really got to think about the PII, because you're conversing with someone and it's their records and things like that. So you have to be very careful, I think, in this area. But there's, I think people are knowledgeable about that. And I think your vendors, if they're very knowledgeable about your space and can help you with the business side of it and bring that to it, that's the situation you want. You want to be aware, everyone's situationally aware of these things, and you all feel that you can mitigate those risks within it. And that's kind of the experiments that I think you could do.
I like this. It's again affirming what you were saying earlier about best practices just get more critical, because vendor management was always a thing. In healthcare, there's business associate agreements to sign. There's the initial vetting, and then you're saying let's not stop at initial vetting because these are evolving technologies. How do you come back around to your supply chain and say, yeah, what have you mitigated? What new technologies did you deploy through your software that we didn't look at last time? And I think it's the same practice, just getting all the more critical, it sounds like, in this.
It is true. I will say you're going to start to see more people using the AI in a safer way than just like, hey, feed a model and see what it responds. I know, like for the things that we're doing, for example, your data will never train a model ever. It won't even get close to that. We use those models as a tool, not as something that is going to go into their database. And that's, we really protect the data kind of within that. And I think you have to look at your vendors and make sure that how are they using it? And just can't have the leakage to the models, because those big frontier models will train on them, and then it'll end up in them, and that's not the place you want to be.
Yeah, which is a new, somewhat of a new concept for us. We use electronic health records. We use other systems. You never think that our EHR vendor is ingesting all of our medical information we're putting in, and they shouldn't be, and it's been protected. But the LLM models just work differently. So that's a good point too. I'm changing gears just a bit, but I think as you build your current initiative, you also, I think you support CIOs, CISOs as well. Do you want to talk about anything in that area, any focus areas that you have to support the C-suite from a security officer standpoint?
Yeah, I appreciate you remembering that, Joe. We have started a community we call the Security Impact Circle, and it's meant to be another network that the security leaders can tap into. It's a hard job, right? I mean, you're being asked to mitigate the risks of the business. It's like, that's a hard thing to do. And our focus in this community is maybe a little different than that, but it's to get with the peers and talk about what are things that make CISOs or other security leaders successful. So how do you engage with the board, and how do you actually, what are they looking for from a risk standpoint? And it may be different than what you're thinking, because security leaders live in the world of very detailed technical kinds of things. And you may have a board member that's got absolutely no background to that, but they read an article in the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal that mentioned something, and they're gonna query you, and that's gonna be a test for you. Like, how confident are they in you that you've got a handle on this? And so sharing best practices on these kinds of things, we felt could use another network in that too. So securityimpactcircle.org is that. And we are right now running kind of workshops for people where we bring board members, public company board members that are on the audit committees, to actually give their view about what they want to hear from the CISOs. And of course, CISOs only have maybe 15 or 20 minutes to kind of get that across too. So it's all part of this. But we also think, I think there's that about the current leaders. There's also future leaders that we have to take care of. And I think introducing to some of these concepts to them. So, the deputy CISOs or the up and comers is an important thing to do too, because there's not a lot of training about, okay, what are the expectations for me going into a board or my CEO or my business peers? And how do I talk in their language, not in my language, so that they understand what I do and they support what I do. And they see that I'm a business enabler, not someone that just says no.
That's powerful. So securityimpactcircle.org. Yeah, these are the roles that can be really, really good at the job, but be very, very good at the mechanics of the job. But then the communication is an area to grow in, or just the power of a network around that, because it's changing so quickly. And I think technology, we're on this track, right, where technology will consume more of the, maybe not take over workforce, but it will be alongside every type of job we have. And the CISO's role, the technology footprint they protect today, is going to become only dramatically larger. It's going to be the skeleton of the organization, right? And so that's really great to hear about. And I think that as we talk to plenty of CISOs in our world, I think that's something that could be really valuable. So thank you for your work in that. Well, that took me through the main questions I wanted to get to hear from you today. I appreciate the expertise you brought to this. Overall, your view, AI, cybersecurity, the next 10 years, are you optimistic? Are you thinking it's going to be a rough 10 years? Do you think it's going to get harder and easier for CISOs, or just more of the same? Let's just do it better.
I think it'll be these next 3 to 5 years, a lot of learning on exactly what we have to do. And again, if you look back on similar trends from, you could go way back from, just the trend to client server kind of computing, and, mobile and cloud, and there's going to be adjustments that have to be made. But I think overall, I'm very optimistic that this can be help to the defenders as much as it's a help to those attackers. And we are going to get a good handle on it. And overall, I think people should be using this because I think it gives them an advantage.
Love it. Okay, so we'll stay hands-on. We'll keep learning. Any other ways to keep in touch with you, Mike? You mentioned securityimpactcircle.org. Any other ways to reach out to you?
Well, I think, we'll eventually come out of stealth, not too distant future. That's pulsesecurity.ai. So if you're curious about that, visit the website, and you'll learn more as we kind of get into it more. And we hope to be very eventually we'll be out there, and love to have you engage in that too, because I think we're creating something that the CISO doesn't have that all the other executives do have, which is somewhat of a help and a system they can rely upon to help them form their strategy. And I think it's going to be interesting from that front too.
Best of luck in that, and cheers to what's ahead. And I appreciate it again. Thanks for your time, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.